How's it going, YouTube? Yeah, Pat Mac here, and I am joined by Incog and Ted. You guys want to say hi?
Hey all, Scott here.
Hello, hello, everybody.
Anyway, we're recording some PRs, some power rankings for our TGR singles league. It's basically like every other singles league you've ever seen, except that there's no Terra. So you can't get bailed out by like having the most legit Terra that you need for a match, or get absolutely screwed because you brought the completely wrong one. Pokemon aren't changing types here, and they're not getting any more coverage. It's as simple as that. So, yeah, I'm very excited to look at these teams. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see who we think has the best. Because I don't know about you guys, but I feel like every time we do this, I already have an idea about who I think the top teams are, and then we talk about it, and I'm like, my choices were so completely off. So, yeah.
Yes.
All right, here we go. Let's go and roll
right?
into this. This is going to be great. I'm so excited for this. Okay, just one thing that as we look at the first team here, this is in draft order. It's not based on who we think has the strongest team. You'll see at the end who we think has the strongest teams because, well, each of us kind of shared what we thought the best teams were. And I know them, but Incog and Ted don't know who each of them picked. So it's going to be pretty interesting here. Anyway, so draft order here. And then on your screen, you can also see the order that coaches picked them. So Darkrai was the first pick, and then it goes across the top. Heatran is the fourth pick. Spiritomb is the very last pick. So let's go start with Incog. What do you think about this team?
My buddy, my brother, my good guy Kurt and his Toronto Rap scores. Let me tell you something. It's a really interesting team. It's very much a standard draft team. You have the Darkrai, you have the Great Tusk, you have the Azumarill and the Heatran, and it's a really good core going forward. You know, Uxie and Ogerpon Teal. The thing that this team will likely run into is the fact that I wish, like, so when I was doing all my ranking stuff and really looking at these teams, it was more so how well do they actually do on and off paper? Because on paper results are cool because you have Terra to look at, but since there's no Terra to look at, some of these Mons might not have an opportunity to really like even show up some games. So I base my rankings on like how much I'm gonna see a Pokemon in this season, and like Spiritomb and Ursaring I might not see a lot because a lot of people know that Ursaring mainly gets used as a Terra captain for a lot of teams, and Spiritomb, while it is a good spin blocker, I mean, how often are you realistically going to want to spin block during your season when you already have one of the best spinners in Great Tusk here? So I don't know. Really good team. I think the only thing that I think it's lacking is a dragon type. I think a dragon type is great in this league, and definitely great overall, but it's not like a big smudge against Kurt. I think this team is really good offensively speaking. Defensively, it's decent. And it's pretty much what I expect out of teams if you don't have access to Terra.
For sure. Ted, what do you think about the like offensive potential for this team?
So obviously, like the main four, like the first four, like offensively, like they're really strong on their own. Belly or not belly bolt. The Azumarill, obviously with that belly jump set, is really threatening. No, Terra kind of kills it a little bit. Like any electric type move or a non-step zipper, Azu is going to take a lot of damage from both of those attacks. Same thing with Great Tusk. It's kind of a electric blocker for the Azu, and they're both kind of complement each other, but both are still weak to grass. But both together are really good offensively. Obviously, Darkrai, like standard Life Orb stats with Dark Pulse, Focus Blast, Sludge Bomb, Protect, stuff like that is really good on it. Dark Void is banned, so no sleep with that, but you can still utilize like a few supportive sets with like Hypnosis and stuff like that. And then Heatran is a good wall. I feel without Terra, again, like it's another mon that wishes it has Terra, but it doesn't here. But it's still pretty good defensively. Fire Steel is pretty nice. Flame Body is always nice for the burns. Setting up Stealth Rocks is good for this team as well. Well, this team has multiple ways of setting up hazards, but Heatran's probably one of the main ways of setting up hazards with Stealth Rocks. And it's pretty good offensively as well, like Earth Power, Lava Plume, Magma Storm to trap in stuff. So yeah, the offensive potential is there. I just feel like this team, like Inka mentioned, like a Dragon type would be really nice on here. And also maybe a little bit more defensive support on the back end as well, because like there's outside of just Uxie and Belly Bolt, there's not really that much defensive support. Spiritomb kind of counts as well because, like Inkok said, like a nice spin blocker is appreciated, but other than that, there's not really much like true defensive backbone to the team.
Yeah, and I'll kind of hop in to talk about the defensive side of things. I think like what I like about the first, well, maybe not Darkrai, but the next 3 picks are very versatile. You can run them offensive, you can run them defensive. So I like that side of things for the team. But the main defensive core of this team I see being Uxie and Belly Bolt, and like potentially Ursaring with like Rest Sleep Top kind of sets with Eviolite. I think like those 3, and then like you could maybe say Spiritomb to a certain extent as well. So I kind of see like those 4 mons being as the main defensive pieces, and I think to a certain extent they can kind of serve pretty like they serve as pretty good switch-ins for each other, right? Like Belly Bolt doesn't want to take any ground attacks, right? And so you can switch in Uxie as like a nice option for that. If you're looking for like ghost attacks up against Uxie, then like Ursaring can be kind of nice as a switch in. So I think there are some nice options for the team from a defensive standpoint. And then you just have some general bulk that I think is going to be pretty solid as well. So yeah, I'm excited to see what this team can do. But defensively, I kind of agree. Like I think a Dragon type would really help here. Like maybe if that cool fish was Dragalge, like I'd like this team way more. Just to give you a little bit of flip turn pivot and some, you still get the T-spikes and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if that's possible in terms of the points and how everything worked out, but I think it would be kind of nice to see that option available for this team. And okay, let's go and take a look at our next team here. We got the Flanders Flygons. And Ted, what do you think about this team overall?
Okay, so this is actually one of my favorite teams overall in the draft. I really like the team that Ronan put together. Galvantula being a fast electric type is always nice. Sticky webs for speed control is really nice. That terrain core with Sleezler and Rillaboom is obviously something you see in BGC. It's also good here. You know, sitting up with the defense boost with Grassy Seed and getting up a sword stance, being really fast is nice as well. And then Rillaboom is that your pivot Pokemon with U-turn, Wood Hammer, Grassy Glide, Stomping Tantrum if you need the ground coverage is always nice as well. Lando, strong ground type. I believe I don't think Sheer Force is banned.
It's
Correct
allowed.
me if I'm wrong.
Oh, I actually do want to hop
Okay.
in real quick. We mentioned Dark Void being banned in the previous team. Dark Void is not banned. It's only banned in our doubles leagues,
Okay.
just because it can guaranteed sleep both months. But Dark Void is okay here. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay. So Sheer Force is allowed, so this hits really, really, really hard. With the Life Orb set. Cinderace, Court Change, another way of removing hazards to the opposing side is nice as well. And then moving slowly on to like the more like lesser side of the team. Hydreigon is a really good dragon type, I would say. Levitate, obviously to switch in those ground type attacks. Hits really hard with Dragon Meteor, Flash Cannon, Dragon Bolt, stuff like that. Klefki, really good support Pokemon. I'm not quite a big fan of it in singles, but it does set up spikes and hazards and stuff like that with screens as well, so that's really nice for this team. Vaporeon, really good defensive water type. Again, it's like one of those other Pokemon that wishes it could Terra, but it can't. So it can't really avoid those grass type attacks, but it is bulky, really bulky water type, so that's good for the team. Grovyle and Drifloon, they both provide that Emburden, so outside of if they don't want to run Caesar, they can have those 2 options in the bag if they want to run Emburden. Probably you won't see it that much, but it is an option.
For sure. And I'll go and talk about like what I think of the offensive potential for the team. I think that there's a lot here. Like they have some really good pivot mons and a lot of offensive pressure. Like we mentioned Landorus having Sheer Force. You add Sheer Force and Life Orb together, and that mon is hitting like an absolute truck. And honestly, it doesn't even need Life Orb a lot of times just because it has a very good special attack stat. And physical, right? You can run Rock Slide as well and get that sheer force boost. But yeah, the downside of it is that it doesn't have an option of boosting its speed, so it's not as strong of a sweeper as it was in previous generations. But this team doesn't need it as a sweeper. You look at Unburden with Driftblim and with Sneasler, and like both of those being able to get a Grassy Seed here, and having that offensive sweep potential is like something that teams are obviously going to have to be very aware of. Like I imagine that you're going to need to have some kind of like ghost or normal type, like I don't know, like what mon do you pick that can deal with both Driftblim as a sweeper and Sneasler as a sweeper when you're looking at prep? I think that's very difficult to do. There's not going to be very many teams that are going to have one mon that could handle both, and so you're putting a lot of pressure on teams to be able to deal with two sweeping options. One thing I will say is that this team can't run like two Grassy Seeds and like Unburden boost to like break with one and then Unburden and burst to break with the other, because we are a item clause league. So that's something that teams are whoever's facing this team is going to be very happy about. But there is a lot of breaking power with Rillaboom, Cinderace, Hydreigon, Landorus. I think that there's a ton of options in terms of like how to break walls down, and then there's a lot of ways for cleaning up with Sneasel and Driftblim. I think that's going to be really nice for the team. Incog, what do you think about the defensive presence and power for this team?
Defensive presence of this team is okay. You have a lot of offensive threats, obviously, but the defensive capabilities of like Driftblim doing strength sap shenanigans is obvious, and then Vaporeon's here, and then Klefki's here to give you screens, spike support, Thunderwave support, etc. So it's really just like Vaporeon has Flip, Turn, and Baton Pass. Driftblim has, I think, Baton Pass and can be a very disgusting monster defensively. And Klefki's here. Like, this team is more offensively focused more than anything else. And I like that because in this kind of no Terra metagame, I feel like you have to play either heavy offense or you have to stall out your opponent. There's no like, yes, can you get off some mid-ground plays? Of course. But the issue becomes how good are those mid-game plans? And they're not always the greatest, in my opinion. So, you know, you just have to deal with it how you do it.
For sure. Let's go and take a look at our next team here. And this is Sector 0, and I'll just kind of chat about what I think of the team in a general sense. I like the potential for this team in terms of the various options they can run. You look at the first 4 Pokemon they've picked, and like those mons can do basically anything. Like all of them have served pretty good defensive roles. All of them serve very good offensive roles. And so I think like having those as a nice backbone of the team is really solid. It does feel a little weird to pick like Goldengo into Glimmora, having those big 2 ground weaknesses. But you followed up, you have like Lurantis, which is a fairly solid mon. Synthesis can keep it a little bit healthy. You got Landorus, of course, you got Noctowl, so you have some good ways of dealing with some of those ground type attacks and switching things up. The hazards from the team are really nice as well. I think like having Landorus and Glimmora, I think gives this team all the hazards that they need. And then they also have ways of removing hazards. You know, they have Tidy Up, they have Mortal Spin from Glimmora, they have Rapid Spin on Quackaball. Like this team has a lot of ways of getting rid of hazards if they don't want to deal with them, and several ways of setting hazards to do quite a bit of pressure on opposing teams. So I like the team in general. I think it's got a pretty solid options available to it. And Ted, what do you think about the... Actually, let's go Incog. What do you think about the offensive pressure for this team?
Offensive pressure is really good by Vito here. Shout out to my boy. You have a lot of good options with the Goldangle, the Glimmora, the Landorus, the Roy. I mean, like, you could just name all these mons, and they're really good offensive pressure-wise. Mm-hmm. I think what this team really does well is momentum. You have a lot of U-turn, you have a lot of baton pass. You obviously no Volt Switch, but you still have really good ways to get into threats and out of situations too. And on top of which, you can trap teams really well into a situation where, oh my god, I need to switch out, I need to do this, and they really don't have the capability of doing that, because once again, in a non-Terra format, you kind of have to deal with the types that you're given and that you selected, my brother in Christ. So good luck. So this team definitely has really good offensive pressure. I was also going to tail back to the other thing about the Dripum and Sneasler earlier. The only Pokemon that will be able to technically beat those both is Aegislash, and we don't have that. So that team definitely has a good going for it because it's Steel Ghost.
Oh, for sure.
But regardless of that fact, this team really good offensive pressure, really good pivoting momentum wise, and definitely is one to be reckoned with, honestly.
And Ted, what do you think about the defensive capabilities of this one?
Defensively, they have some good options here. Goldango obviously doesn't have to be offensive. Good as Gold is a really good defensively ability. Stopping like Thunder Waves, Will-O-Wisps, all those status moves is really great for this team. Like stopping Will-O-Wisp, like going into Roaring Moon or like offensive Lando T is really nice. Glimmora is pretty good defensively. The typing is not that great, but Mortal Spin as support option outside of like Rapid Spin and Tidy Up is really nice. Getting those poisons and toxic debris at the same time as well is going to be really good for this team. Sylveon, really strong defensive Pokemon, but having fairy typing is really nice for this team as well. Wish Pash, I don't think you can do it here, but Wish support is really nice. And you can like force a switch out with Yawn and stuff like that. So that's really good there. Chinchino, to an extent, is pretty defensive. Normal typing is not really great because you're still going to take Super Effective with fighting, but switching into Ghost types is really nice. Tied up, obviously, to set up yourself up, and also getting Ring Hazards is really nice. Lurantis is also pretty good defensively. Grass typing is not that great, but having like Synthesis and stuff like that is really good for healing up. But yeah, outside of that, there's not really much defensively. This team is like partially offensive, partially defensive. So we'll see how they go with this team.
For sure. And looking at the Malform Mayhem, Inkai, what do you think about this team overall?
Sandy. You always come around here asking your boy Avery for help, and I didn't help him with this draft. Funny story. But no, seriously, Sandy, good team. I think that offensively, really decent. I think you have the ability to do the funniest things with terrain plus Halucha, and then also like having the defensiveness of Tinkaton into Tinglu, and even sometimes Serena is really good. This team is particularly one of my favorites because it has Spectrair, and if anybody knows, I have only won a Draftling Championship, and it had Spectrair at the base. And let me tell you something, that's a really disgusting Pokemon right there if it's able to snowball. And the thing about it is the difference between what I had and what Sandy has is that he has no Terra, and I obviously had a Terra Pokemon in a Great Tusk, don't ask. And the thing about it was that it didn't matter that I had a Terra Pokemon. Spectre always came through every single fucking game. And for Sandy, it could very much do the same thing. I mean, you stop priority Sucker Punches with Indeedee, and even just going hard Serena on certain times. You have really good defensive capabilities, covering up its dark weakness with the Tinglu, and even the Ghost weakness, of course. And in general, you have a lot of good defensive pieces that really help you I guess, what's the terminology we use for that? Snowball. You have a really good way of snowballing into a way that Spectre can get off a sweep. And with Hazard stacking from Deoxys Speed, Tinglu, and even T-Spikes from like Salazzle, and then also additional rocks if you can't get them with Tinglu with Tinkaton. Team's fantastic. I just think it's kind of like the entire issue of like not item clause, but also like top 6 clause. Like you can only bring 6 mons to a game. What 6 you bring very much is like it can get really weird really quickly.
For sure. Ted, what do you think about the offensive capabilities for this one?
So obviously, Spectre, like in Kakusai, if you can't get rid of it, it's going to snowball really quickly. So that's obviously one of the main offensive pieces on this team. Deoxys Speed is actually pretty offensive as well. Not only being fast, but also having ways to set up is really nice as well. And it can also set up defensively as well with like spikes and screens and stealth rocks, stuff like that. Obviously, Halucha as well with the terrain. Getting up that Psychic Seed with the Spadef boost and setting up with Swords Dance is really strong. if you can't get rid of it quickly. Luxray, again, another good setup sweeper as well with agility and facade with guts. Flame Orb, I'm really familiar with that. And then outside of that, you can run an offensive Tinglu. It doesn't have to be defensive. You can run like with Earthquake, Throat Chop, Protect, and some other coverage move. So it doesn't have to be defensive, but most of the time you're going to want it to be defensive. And then outside of that, there's not really much else you could run offensively. Salazzle is another option as well, like Flamethrower, Sludge Bomb, Toxic, Protect, stuff like that. So yeah, overall, like the main, I would say the top four are the backbone of that offensive pressure team.
For sure. And I think like defensively, I don't think this team has as much. You mentioned quite a bit of the offensive pressure on the team, and I think that like Sandy's going to be wanting to break quite a bit to open things up for Spectrier, kind of like what we've been talking about. But in terms of defensively, I think we're looking at like Tinglu, Tinkaton. Deoxys speed can be fairly defensive just because it has so much speed that you can put so much into bulk. And then you kind of have Serena, I think, after that. And I kind of see like those four as potentially being like the defensive mons on the team. But of course, like they put some pressure on Pokemon, and they can kind of break through and help Spectre out to weaken things enough so that mon can just win. So defensively, I think that the team could probably use a little bit more. I think like the two main mons that we're looking at from a defensive standpoint are Tinglu and Tinkaton. And like they don't necessarily cover each other amazingly well in terms of like weaknesses kind of thing. So I'm not a huge fan of the defensive backbone of the team, but their offensive pressure looks really strong. So I'm excited to see how this team does. And next team we have here is the Brooklyn Paradox. And Ted, what do you think about this team in general?
Okay, so in general, I haven't used Terrapagos a whole lot in drafts at the moment, but I've seen it pop off several times in other leagues. I think defensively is really strong. Rapid Spin with heavy duty boots is nice to get rid of hazards. It can run setup. It gets Rock Polish, so you can run Rock Polish and three other strong attacking moves, so like Star Sheer Storm, I believe it's called. Dazzling Gleam, Earth Power. You can run several other moves as well, so it can sit up and go crazy. And with its ability, like get resisting your opponent's attack just the one turn is really nice. So it can set up with a Rock Polish or Calm Mind, stuff like that. So offensively and defensively, it's really strong for that. Tornadus doesn't have the fog, but it is a strong regenerator Pokemon, so you can click U-turn and whenever you're low and get up that HP back. Masquerada, really strong grass type. Obviously Protein helps it a ton. Clicking U-turn, Flower Trick, Knock Off, stuff like that for strong stab. Option immediately is really nice. Arcanine, Intimidate, and Rockhead are both excellent abilities. I think in singles it's a really hard mon to deal with if you don't have the right options to deal with it. Tentacruel does another Pokemon that gets Rapid Spin, but it can set up spikes and Toxic Spikes, Scald, so it can be really, really annoying and really, really bulky if you don't deal with it. Alolan Ninetales, another good support Pokemon. Aurora Veil with the snow is really great. Provides support to Arcanine, Masquerada, and Terrapagos if they want to set up, or just go crazy turn one. Flygon, now that I've seen it perform well in other leagues and not so well in other leagues, I'm kind of iffy on it, but it can run Scarf. It's a really good choice Pokemon, so you can run 4 moves and outspeed a lot of things with Choice Scarf. Bronzong, Mismagius, and the Arbok are pretty good defensively. 2 Levitate Pokemon, so obviously this team is not too weak to ground, but having 2 backup Levitate options is really nice. And then Arbok can sweep with like Scale Shot and Gunk Shot and stuff like that. So yeah, overall, like, it's pretty good defensively. I would say it's a really strong defensive team, but they do have strong offensive options.
For sure. And I think for those offensive options, I actually think that they kind of have Meowscarada and Arcanine as like the two big heavy hitters for the team. And then after that, I kind of think their offense falls off a little bit. I think they could probably use maybe some really strong breaker on the special side of things. I think you're kind of looking at like Tornadus and like maybe Mismagius as like, I guess a little bit Ninetales to a certain extent. I forget exactly what special attack stat that mon has, but it's kind of like those three are kind of the special breakers. And I think this team could kind of use a little bit more in that area. But they do have a lot of physical pressure. Meowscarada and Arcanine both put a ton of pressure on different mons. Like you could potentially see like a water type coming in, or maybe a ground type coming in to take an Arcanine hit. And then that mon just gets like weakened, and then Meowscarada can take care of it, kind of idea. So I do like the offensive pressure from the team for those two mons in particular. But after that, it's a very like balanced, maybe defensive-esque team, and I think that they're a little light on special offense. That would be nice to kind of shore up. I think there are some mons here with some setup. If I remember, Mismagius does have Nasty Plot, Torn has Nasty Plot, Terapagos has Calm Mind, so there are some ways to kind of set up, and Veil can help that out. So they have some ways of kind of sweeping and getting off that rock polish like Ted mentioned. But I would like to see some heavier breakers on the special side of things for this team, for me to think of it as like a real strong contender for the season. Incog, what do you think of the defensive capabilities for this one?
It's one of those teams, man. It's one of those teams where the defensiveness falls on 1 to 2 Pokemon. Good God. Listen, I like this team like you guys are talking about. I do think the special attacking point is kind of strong because it's like Mismagius, Ninetales, Tornadus, and like Terapagos, I guess. And then like that's it. Like 2 of those will probably get used more consistently, in my opinion. Defensively, this team falters a lot because first off, you have one of the best spinners, Terapagos, and then second best on your team is Tentacruel, so that's cool. You know, you don't have Defog, unfortunately, so defensively, hazards are going to be a mess unless you're bringing Arbok every week in case of T-spikes. Outside of that, like I said, it falls on Bronzong a lot of the time. Yes, you can bring bulky Tornadus, and yes, you can bring bulky Terapagos, but I feel like Terapagos is one of those mons that you want to have like with a little bit more offense than defense, but I mean, I could be wrong. People have been using this Pokemon more than me, clearly. I haven't had a chance to draft it because I don't get good draft positions generally. And even when I do, I have a different idea. But yeah, it's going to really fall on the Bronzong, and definitely the Tornadus and sometimes the Tentacruel. But when you're fighting things like, for example, I think you're going to be fighting a lot, probably a Sun team. You're probably going to fight something else that has a lot of heavier hitters. This is why I said this metagame is very offensive, and this team is pretty blatant of that. It's like it has the offense, but you need to at least have at least like 2 walls on a team at least to at least make it work, and this team doesn't have that, unfortunately, which it happens. You know, you sometimes in the draft you can't get the things that you want to get. It happens, but this team, we'll see if it suffers or if it takes advantage of the fact that, oh yeah, they have more defensive pieces than I have than anything else, and I have a lot of offensive pieces. It'll work. We'll see, man. We'll see. I think defensively, it definitely is not good.
Okay. And we'll take a look at the Middle Village Pidubs here. And I think just from an overall team, like this team has such a clear path. It's like, please let me have Sun for all of the game, and I can go crazy with like, what, 4 photosynthesis mons and a 2 chlorophyll, 3 chlorophyll? I'm pretty sure Cottony has chlorophyll. I don't know if we count that mon as having chlorophyll, but yeah, this team is like so built around Torkoal that I'm like to a certain extent concerned about how much it needs Torkoal in order for it to function. Now, of course, Torkoal's a very good, has very good defensive stats, and so it can switch in and out. You can maybe run it with like a Heat Rock, and then the Sun stays up for a really long time. I believe like you could have Sunny Day on Screamtail like as a bulkier mon to be able to set that as well, to help out your triple dragon core, which is kind of wild. So I think this team has like the triple dragon, triple fairy options on the team, which are pretty wild. So in terms of like just in a general sense, they don't have too much in the way of like type variety, but they do have a very clear theme with their sun and some very, very strong Pokemon if you can get that sun going and keep it up. So I think teams are going to have a very clear path to try to fight this team. It's going to be changed weather. If you can change the weather, you're looking a lot better against a lot of these Pokemon. But yeah, this team has some pretty insane potential. Yeah, okay. And Inka, what do you think about the offensive capabilities of this team?
I don't want to call you potential man, but there's a lot of potential on this team. Offensively, I mean, what else is there to say? Like, just being real. Gouging Fire, Walking Wake, Raging Bolt. You picked the trifecta, and then you decided to say, fuck it. I'm going to grab Scream Tail, which can definitely be offensive if you really challenge it to be. Venusaur, Enamorous, Hatterene, like, all of these mons are super damn good. And the problem, the thing about it is, with too much offense comes not enough defense, but we'll get into that obviously with Ted. But this team offensively, it cruises against a lot of other teams because how do you stop the amount of pressure that you're getting from Gouging Fire, Walking Wake, and Raging Bolt at the same time? Yes, Sun might not go up, and you might have to be like, man, you know, I gotta do it 1 week. I gotta bring Manual Sun because I didn't want to bring Torkoal. But outside of that, this is a really dangerous fucking team, and in my opinion, one of the better. I mean, offensively, obviously really good, but you know, defensively, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, really good offensively. I think the lack of type variety will definitely bite you in the ass in the end, but that can definitely be shored up with maybe even just one transaction. But it's definitely really good. It's top heavy. Well, not top heavy, but it's very over centralized in the sun category, let's say. But if the lack of type diversity doesn't scare you, believe me, everything else will.
For sure. And Ted, what do you think of this team from a defensive standpoint?
Yeah, there's it's the defensive aspect of this team is kind of nothing. 3 dragon types, 3 grass types, and 3 fairy types. It's a little bit of a sideways thing. But they do have some pretty defensive options, like you mentioned, Pat. Like Torkoal is really good defensively, like with Rapid Spin, Stealth Rocks, stuff like that. And then Screamtail is a super annoying defensive Pokemon. Like Encore Disable is really annoying to deal with. If you don't have Taunt, you can set up Stealth Rocks as well. Thunder Wave, Perish Song, if you really want to go with that. Hatterene with Magic Bounce as well to stop hazards from going up on their side is really nice as well. Can set up a Trick Room if Trick Room is really an option here. Probably not, but it is there. Venusaur to an extent is really good defensively without the Sun Up. Can be pretty strong with like Leech Seed and Weather Ball, and just to be really annoying under the sun is really nice as well. And then after that, there's not really much else defensively. This team is entirely offensive with the triple dragons and the triple fairies. So yeah,
Gonna be pretty wild. I'm excited to see this one. I'm not super high on this team, just because of the type diversity, but the centralizing sun I think is gonna be really cool to see how it does. Okay, so we move on to our next team here, and Incog, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, some guy drafted this team. I don't know his name. I forgot. What's his name? Mac Pat, something like that. I don't know.
Something like that.
I mean, overall, I think the team's really nice. I mean, the thing about this team that I really like is there's not too many holes, but it definitely could use, maybe a different electric type. I don't know, but we've had this discussion off camera, or at least it has been discussed in the chat. But from a objective standpoint, without including Pat, obviously being the team, this team is really fun. I feel like you have a lot of good momentum in the different threats. You have a good way of getting up hazards with Cleavor and definitely Gliscor, and obviously Greninja. All of them giving you at least one form of hazards, whether it's Stone Ice Cleavor, whether it's Stealth Rock Gliscor, or whether it's Spikes and T-Spikes on Greninja. You have a really good way of getting up hazards, which is really important in a league where, the item clause is definitely going to be taking big effect. You have really good defensive mons with, I would say, the surprise of the generation, in my opinion, is Arboliva. Fezandivity Spadef is really good. Empoleon defensively is really nice. And I do like Reuniclus under certain circumstances, so you definitely have that. I also think arguably you have a really, at least okay Trick Removal with Reuniclus and Arboliva. They can obviously work hand in hand with each other. But I guess, like, I haven't even talked about the big cheese in Dragapult. Dragapult's really good for this team as well, getting off good momentum alongside the other Mons. I think the only thing about this team that it kind of lacks is one of the things that I take away from a lot of teams is 6 Pokemon syndrome, right? You kind of have to look at a team like this and say, okay, there's like against other teams, you have 8 possible Mons you have to prep for. And I guess that kind of dwindles down to like, is it easier to prep for those 8 Mons or is it harder to prep for those 8 Mons per team? Because like Hitmonchan's cool. It's a good enough spinner. Like Zebstrika, despite getting Supercell Slam, I know is not good. So shocking thing, I know. Overall, I think this team is definitely like good. Great would be kind of exaggerating, but I think that if it had like I think missing a fire type, and also like I like Fez as much as the next guy, but maybe a different fairy type would be better. I don't know. But again, I think the team's good. I think it'll do really well. Outside of that, I mean, yeah, good team.
Okay. Ted, what do you think of the offensive potential for this team?
The offense, it's more of a balanced offense, I would say. Because your hard offensive Pokemon on this team is that Dragapult. You're like setting up Dragon Dance to set up Sweep with like Dragon Ball or Dragon Darts. With like a ghost move and something else for coverage is really nice. But it can also go on the special side as well, like Shadow Ball with Specs, Draco Meteor, stuff like that. So that's the main offensive support piece you're on for this team. And then after that, it's pretty much a debate whether or not you want to run like a true offensive set on this Pokemon. But Greninja can definitely be offensive. Battle Bond is legal, so you can potentially switch it in when your opponent is very low and just hit like a Water Shuriken or an Ice Beam, get up those stat boosts, and just completely turn the table on your opponent. So that's an option there with that. And then Gliscor, you can still run the Poison Heal ability with Toxizorb, and it can also be offensive. So you can run like a Swords Dance it with Facade, Earthquake, Protect. Those are the general set on you can run on it. And then after that, it's pretty much a debate because Fezandipity and Empoleon can definitely be offensive, but they're mainly your support pieces. And then Cleavor to an extent as well can be offensive, like with Stone Axe, U-Turn, X-Scissor. And then after that, there's not really much else. Zebstrika can be offensive with Choice Band with Supercell Slam, so you can boost up your damage with that. But again, it can miss, and if you hit a ground type, you still take 50% from your health. So again, I would categorize this team as more of a balanced offense than truly offensive offense.
Yeah, for sure. I think the defensive pieces are kind of where I think this team has a lot of them. Like I think Gliscor, Reuniclus, Fezandipity, Empoleon, Arboliva, like having those 5 Mons work fairly well defensively and be able to like kind of pick and choose the one that seems like it's going to be best for the week. I think it's been kind of nice. And I think to a certain extent, it's kind of hard to break through some of these Mons. The middle 3 there with Reuniclus, Fezandipity, and Empoleon all have like good recovery on their own, so they don't need to rely on any recovery. And then Gliscor also has Toxic Heal, so maybe I should include that. So like, there's quite a bit of like passive recovery on the team as well as good recovery abilities. I think some of the nice part about that I personally like about this team is the defensive Mons also have momentum, so we can like look to slow momentum into some of our breakers that Ted and Incog mentioned. But I think in terms of defensively, I like that the team can switch into a lot of different type attacks, and so it makes it for a wide variety of options in terms of how to play the team and then what we want to do for it. There was a mention of this team missing a fire type. I do agree. I remember when I was drafting it, I like got toward the end of the draft and realized, oh, I don't have a fire type somehow. Whoops. But you know, sometimes that's how it goes. Sometimes you just miss out on some types, and maybe I'll look to make a transaction or something during the season. But anyway, moving on. Take a look at our next team here. and we got the Virginia pressure. And Incog, what do you think about the about this one?
Why did you start with me? Okay. Well, I'm not very high. Okay, so listen. This team on paper looks really good. Okay, I love Urshifu single strike as much as the next guy. Clefable, Scizor, Blastoise, Chi-Yu, Kilowatt Trail. As y'all know, that's Watrel with the twang. Mew, Zork, Diplin is here, and then Dugtrio, Lola. Right, it's really good. Like it works out. I don't know about the Diplin or Dugtrio pick. I think with the Pokemon I'm looking at, used a lot of points, and then said, "Dang, I gotta go in the bargain bin and go get something. Let me grab Diplin," because from what I know to be true, because I've had to explain it to people, it's not a very good Pokemon. Dugtrio, I could see it coming maybe like 1 week for like a meme. I think that this team overall, though, definitely has the makings of a good team. Has type diversity. It has a good good enough spinner in the Blastoise, which can definitely just not be a spinner, and you could just use it offensively, of course. I think where this team starts to die is like, hey, where's my Defog? Do I really have to run Defog Scizor? And the answer is no, you could just run Rapidash Blastoise, but again, that's where the problem in lies. You have a lot of Mons that would, or at least you have two really significant Mons in Kilowattrel and Chi-Yu who really want those boots. And even then, another significant one is Clefable. If you're not running Magic Guard, and you're running Unaware, you want boots on that maybe. So the problem, I guess, would be hazard removal, hazard control. And indeed, you don't have a way, like not having a grounded poison on this team is going to be the death of it, because a lot of Mons suffer from the fact that they can get poisoned really easily. And in general, I think it's the Mons on this team are great, but in practice, this team becomes very easy to pick apart due to the fact that it's missing certain roles and certain things that most teams may miss. But you're going to be fighting a lot of teams that have these things. A grounded poison to get rid of T-spikes, a way to consistently spin against people and threaten out also their spin blocker out. Item clause being a really big thing will definitely haunt this team a little bit, but it is what it is when it comes to this kind of league. So overall, decent team. I would say that it's good enough to sneak in if there's a playoff spot available, but it is, instead of Rum's team, this is definitely the potential team where it's like, this can do really well or it can do really poor. You proved me wrong, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, Ted, what do you think about the offensive ability for this team?
So this team can hit really, really hard. Chi-Yu obviously being a really good special wall breaker. Beads of Ruin is really strong, so you're boosting yourself with Dark Pulse, Heat Wave, Overheat, Ruination as well to an extent with that. Urshifu Single Strike. I always love Rapid Strike for some reason. Single Strike obviously hits really hard with that Wicked Blow. Close Combat hits really hard with that Choice Band, so obviously your main physical wall breaker. Scizor as well with Bullet Punch, Technician, really strong. U-turn for pivoting. Bug Bite as well to get boosted by a Technician, so there's several ways you can deal with that. And Blastoise as well, if you don't want to run Rapid Spin like Incog said, you can run an offensive set with Shell Smash and Ice Beam, Dragon Pulse, Scald. Actually, no, not Scald. Hydro Pump, it doesn't get Scald, which is really sad. But it hits really hard on the special side if you're able to get up a Shell Smash. And then finally, that Kilowattrel hits really hard as well with Volt Switch, Thunderbolts, Hurricanes, Slash as well. And then after that, it kind of just dips a little bit. Mew mainly want to be using it as a defensive piece. It can be offensive with Dragon Dance and Nasty Plot and stuff like that, but most of the time you're going to be wanting to have a defense on it. And then Zoroark as well, it's good with its illusion ability, so you can disguise yourself as a Blastoise or Scizor in some situations. So you can utilize that, but after that, like I said, it just kind of dips.
For sure. I think in terms of thinking about the defensive side of this team, I think there is way too much pressure on Clefable to be like the defensive mon here. I'm a little bit concerned about the team from that side of things. We kind of mentioned the idea of Deoxys Speed being an okay defensive mon, just because it has so much speed that it could run some more bulk. But Kilowattrel doesn't have as much bulk or as much speed as Deoxys Speed does, so even though it has the ability to have Roost, it's a little bit lacking in terms of the defensive side of things, and so Clefable has so much pressure on it to be a defensive mon. Blastoise and Dipplin to a certain extent can be defensive just because of Dipplin has like fairly good stats. Eviolite, you can't lose it if you run Sticky Hold. So there's some of that going on. And if I remember correctly, Dipplin does have some recovery with Recover. I might be wrong about that. But I think just like in a general sense, there's just, in my opinion, there's almost too much pressure on Clefable to be the defensive mon that I'd kind of like to see something happen in terms of like transaction to help that out a bit. Mew could be kind of that mon to help out Clefable, but I think that without having its own form of recovery, I don't think it's as strong as a defensive piece as it has in the past. So we have triple darks, just like maybe you switch out Zoroark and give this team another defensive option. I really like the breaking power of like the double dark types with Urshifu and Chi-Yu, so I think Zoroark could probably go, and you could look to pick up something that works a little bit defensively to help shore up this team a little bit. Maybe you grab that poison type that Incog was talking about, so that you don't have to run Rapid Spin Blastoise with boots every week to clear those hazards to help out your Chi-Yu, your Kilowattrel, your Clefable, that kind of stuff. So that's just something I'd consider for the team. But we talked about the offensive pressure from this team, and there's quite a bit of it. So we'll see how it goes for this team. And let's head over to Ted. What do you think about this team in general?
So we have our reigning champion from the previous season, EJS. I think he drafted another really strong team here. I would prefer if he had Baxcalibur on this team. I know, Pat, we discussed this a little bit previously as well.
Yeah.
I think Baxcalibur with Slowking would definitely be better, but I've kind of grown fond of Kyurem a little bit now. It did lose Roost, which is unfortunate. I think having that recovery option is nice. But he has really strong offensive options as well with that Iron Valiant booster, speed booster, special attack is really nice as well with like Spirit Break and Blast and Force your first combat. So you have strong shag options with that. Ogerpon, Water or Ogerpon Wellspring, really good defensively. With that Water and Grass typing, can show up those Water type attacks. This team kind of doesn't want to deal with water type attacks, so it's good for that. And then moving on shortly down with the team's Rapid Spinner and the Iron Treads, really good steel and ground type, really good defensively. So rocks, and like I said, Rapid Spinner is really nice. It's really hard with it's Iron Heads, so all around really good mon with that. And then another good defensive mon is that Zapdos. With static as well, so you can take on those physical attackers and eventually get the static paralysis. So yeah, there's good with that. Next is Diancie. Again, another rocker, really good fairy type as well. It's alright defensively. You can set up like body presses and iron defenses, so it's good with that. And then after that, it before Kieran kind of dips a little bit with the support, but Misdreavus is really good with support-wise. Eviolite, obviously the only mon on the team that can have Eviolite. I guess set up Trick Room, it can be offensive as well if it was wanted to, but it's mainly there for that support ghost type with them tape. Our low tier fire type, I think is really good value for this team. They don't have, or yeah, they do have that Firewall the rest of them. So typing with that. And then Skunking is for absorbing poison, but I already have Slowking for that. But again, it's another mon that can absorb those Toxic Spikes. And then Kirim finally, that strong special attacker with Freeze Strike, Glaciolate, Dragon Pulse, Shaker Meteor. Standard stuff you're going to see. And it gets that, also gets that defense boost under spell. So, yeah, overall, a really, really
For sure. I think talking about the offensive side of this team, like I really like the options that they have. I think Ogerpon Wellspring can hit pretty hard. Then you have like really, really solid mixed attackers with Iron Valiant and Kirim. Like those mons just like can hit crazy hard. Between having just like really strong attack stats. I want to say like Iron Valiant, I believe, is like 130 on physical attack and like 120 on special attack, so like really hard to be able to prep for both of those mons. And then Kirim is similar, it's like 130 I believe on both sides, and so they both have options for setting up too, so like you even have to deal with that. So this team has so much offensive pressure with just those two mons. You add in the crit potential from Ogerpon. Oftentimes like you can to even struggle a bit with like Storm Drain. But of course you have most of those mons that have Storm Drain are water types, and then you just hit them with your grass attack afterwards. So the mon can spam water moves fairly well, can hit pretty hard as on that side of things. And then Zapdos has some pretty strong special attack stats, as well as just being fairly good defensively. So I really like the offensive power of this team. I think you kind of have to bring Iron Valiant, Kirim almost every week, and like then you're looking at like Ogerpon to kind of support that offense, and maybe Zapdos to support that offense. And like, don't get me wrong, that's not a bad thing. Like it's definitely good. And I think that this team has just a lot of power. It has some good sweep potential between like Dragon Dance, Kirim, or Booster Speed, Iron Valiant. You could even have a little bit of damage from Booster Speed, Iron Treads potentially, but I think you're looking at those main 3 to 4 offensive mons to break through and kind of clean up teams. Incog, what do you think about the defensive powers of this team?
DJS, I think I've always habitually have talked about your team in a negative fashion, and then somehow in some way you win or you get very far. So excuse my French here, but damn, this team looks fucking horrible to break. I mean, let's talk about it, right? Zapdos, Glow King, Diancie, already a start. Kirim with pressure. Yes, I know you lost Roost, but let me tell you something. Pressure is still fucked. And Iron Treads, there is not one type that you can go ahead and spam on those 5 mons. Yes, 3 of them you could technically spam Earthquake, right? But then you have to deal with the floating bird of electricity over there. And then it's like, even after you could try and do that, you still have to deal with the fact that you probably won't kill each of those in one shot. I don't think I've seen Glow King killed in one shot in a long time unless someone is boosted. Diancie, yes, Steel is a bit dangerous, but Treads comes in. Zapdos comes in. And even then, like, Ogerpon can still be low-key a very good defensive threat, especially against teams with offensive waters. And then, in general, Skuntank can definitely be funny defensively. I mean, I've definitely seen it absorb hits better than the next Pokemon. Mischievous is always going to be a weird Pokemon to me since we don't have Terra. So it's like, hey, it's kind of here, I guess, defensively. It's not really too great. But, I mean, if you're fighting an Ursaluna, yeah, it's pretty good for that, I guess. Pyro is not defensive, and neither is Iron Valiant, in my opinion. But you can secretly try and do it, and I know you can. You've won this league before, so I mean, overall, defensively, really strong team.
For sure. And looking at our next team here, we have the Ohio Arceus, and I'll just talk about the team in general. I really like this this team. I think they went for a more like balanced in terms of points aspect. I want to say that like the first 8 Pokemon they drafted all the way to Volcarona are like approximately the same point value. I want to say they're like within 2 to 3 points of each other, maybe 5. Maybe I was stretching a little bit too much. But yeah, I think that this team has a lot of variety. You can't just like prep for the top 3 and like kind of cover the rest. There's just a lot of power on this team. These Pokemon hit hard. They can pivot fairly well. They have some set potential with like Quiver Dance Volcarona, for example. I think what's also nice when you look at this team is that there isn't a Mon that's trying to steal boots from Volcarona, because we're not really going to count Cramorant. So being able to run boots on Volcarona is very easy for this team to do every week. And I think that there's just a lot of pressure that this team can put on. The lead situation that this team puts you in with the Hisuian Zoroark is like so messed up. Like, could you imagine starting with Zoroark, Hisuian Zoroark disguised as like King Gambit? Like, what are you supposed to do about that? You know, like, you try to pivot, and then like if your team is slower than Hisuian Zoroark, then you just get popped. Say you try to pivot and like King Gambit is there, and it actually is King Gambit, and then you just hit them with some like crazy strong attack. So like, I think Hisuian Zoroark makes this team like so messed up. And then you add the option of having like screens with Grimmsnarl. You add like a very good defensive piece with Garganacl. And like, this team is a little bit hard to break too. You know, like, you have very good defensive options. You have very good offensive options. Your team is balanced in a general sense, and you have sweet potential. Like, this, I mean, we're not even going to talk about the last two Mons. Like, those could probably be something a little bit better for the team in a general sense, but like, those are still okay. Like, those Mons can still do something in a game. So yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty scared about this team. I think they have a lot of pressure. I think they have a lot of the lead scenario, I think, is really tough against this team. It's going to be very difficult to figure out like what is the right lead to go with in terms of being able to, from a prep standpoint, to deal with the Hisuian Zoroark. So I don't know. This team's going to be pretty crazy. I'm interested to see what they can do with it. And Incog, what do you think about the offensive pressure for this team?
There's not a whole lot else to say about the offensive pressure because it's actually just crazy good.
I know, right?
I mean, Latios getting the buff on missed balls are really fantastic. King Gambit exists. Zoroark, Hisuian disguising as other Pokemon can definitely lead to a lot of nasty plot snowballing effects. Iron Hands is great this gen. Grimmsnarl providing screen support is cool, but obviously offensively it could provide you a lot more support than just your simple Fairy Dart stabs. It has a lot of good coverage. Mamoswine is really good offensively. I think we all know that. Garganacl is annoying, as we all have figured out. And Volcarona is probably one of the most underrated, normally rated, overrated Pokemon. It's so odd to say that three things out loud, but if you understand, then you know. Because every time I see Volcarona, it's either it could sweep you or it'll just lose to, or it'll just lose. And it's like you never know what you're gonna get each game. Now, on those last two Pokemon, listen, Cramorant is a demon if you allow it to become one. And I'm not even going to speak on Ivysaur. I've definitely had my fair share of Ivysaur can clutch this game moments because as a middle evolution starter liker, you know, Ivysaur is cool. So, you know, there is that too. But yeah, I mean, great offensively, defensively. I mean, I'm not going to speak on it, but I mean, I think it's definitely still good defensively, but offensively, great team.
And Ted, what do you think about that defensive part of this team?
I think their defensive part of this team is really strong as well. Slow momentum with Iron Hands is really nice. So, like, one of the main problems with Iron Hands is its special defense, right? You can always slap on an Assault Vest and, boost up its SPDEF and be insanely bulky, and you can just slope it with Volt Switch. Grimmsnarl obviously being bulky as well behind screens, Thunder Wave, Taunt, things like that. And then Volcarona is also really bulky as well with the Flame Body ability. Again, another way of slowing down those physical attackers and those setup sweepers. And then King Bandit can also be defensively good as well. Yes, you do have to be careful of those fighting type attacks, but you have ways of covering for that. And then Latias are really strong offensive and bulky Pokemon. You can run Mist Ball and Thunder Waves and stuff like that. So yeah, overall I think the defensive side of things is pretty covered.
For sure. Okay, our next team here, we have the Bell Tower Radiance, and Incog, what do you think about this team overall?
Well, Lady Lilac, you've come over to singles. I don't believe this is the first time, nor will it be the last time. I like the team a little bit. Now I say this because, you know, it's a really fun, like the top 6 are really good, and like I like Lantern, I like Ogre Pawn. What I'm saying, Cornerstone is an interesting mon. I don't see it used very often, so it's gonna be interesting watch your season go by while using it. We don't have to talk about Diglett and Vulpix, but I do want to touch on Diglett. There's a lot of mons you can trap with that mon. I want you to figure out which ones you can and which ones you can't, because it's actually really good at doing it. Now, as for the other mons in general, I think that you have a lot of great pivot options defensively and offensively. I mean, switching hard into Latios sometimes will probably be really difficult, but if you can do it pretty successfully, I mean, hey man, really good Pokemon. I think the biggest, the elephant in the room, or more like the bear in the room, is Ursaluna Blood Moon. You don't trick room to use it, so you can just go ahead and go crazy offensive with it. And you really don't need too much bulk, or you don't need too much special attack just to go crazy when you have a throat spray set on hand. I think as well, when you look at this team from just like hazards and getting rid of them, you have spikes, obviously, with Cecil Said's Hisuian Samurott. You have T-Spikes, I'm pretty sure, with Iron Moth. I don't think Ogerpon ever gets Stealth Rocks, which is just so unfortunate. But you do have Diglett with Stealth Rocks, I guess, which is cool. I think Ursaluna might get him as well. But you have the ability to defog with one of the most overrated and underrated Pokemon in 2 generations now, Corviknight. I still love Corviknight. I think people hate Corviknight, though. But overall, really good team. I think that you could add maybe like, I would say maybe another like bulkier Pokemon, but I mean, Corviknight and Florges are great back to back, not in terms of draft order, but just in terms of Pokemon to switch into, and Lantern's cool. But I feel like Ogerpon definitely sticks out like a sore thumb in my opinion, so you could definitely shore that up with like a different Pokemon, maybe even like a different grass type in my opinion, just because I think that that would be cool. I would also challenge and say that because of item clause, heavy duty boots are going to be basically on your Iron Moth forever, unless you want to put them on Corviknight some weeks, which does mean, unfortunately, that if you can't get rid of T-Spikes and you have to go into Iron Moth and put something, that's going to cause a lot of ruckus and could be very bad for you. So definitely need to be careful overall. But I think, Lady Lilac's a champion of her own in this league, so I think she'll figure it out, in my opinion. So definitely a really good team.
For sure. Ted, what do you think about the offensive ability of this team?
So obviously the main things on this thing is that Latios really strong offensively. Sorry, Less Purge also another move that got a boost this generation, or a buff. You can run like against agility. I'm pretty sure against agility, so you can boost up your speed and hit with Lesser Purge, Draco Meteor, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, stuff like that. Student Samurott doesn't have to be a defensive Pokemon. It can be offensive with Caesar's Edge, Razor Shell, Aqua, um, stuff like that. Sacred Sword, Sucker Punch, Aqua Jet. It has a lot of good moves, and it can hit really hard on both sides, physically and especially. Iron Moth, again, it does kind of suffer not being able to run booster, because you're just kind of forced to run heavy duty boots. But in weeks that you technically don't want to run boots, you can run that booster speed or booster special attack and just go wham with it, like with Fire Dance, Sledge Wave, Energy Ball, stuff like that. So it's enough from that. And then the main point for this team is that Ursaluna Blood Moon has various ways of setting up and various ways of hitting hard. Obviously, one being is that Hyper Voice Throat Spray set with Blood Moon and Earth Power Protect Hyper Voice. It's just a really strong set overall. You can run Life Orb as well if you really want to, specs as well. So yeah, there's multiple ways of hitting super hard with that Ursaluna. And then Cornerstone, it can be offensive, but it's mostly there for that sturdy ability. So you want to be super bulky and take up with that. But in some weeks, if you really want to go offensive with that, you can just run like Ivy Cudgel, which is the only 100% accurate rock move currently at the moment. So that's really good with that. So yeah, overall, really strong options.
And yeah, we'll just see what Lilac does with it during the season.
For sure. I think looking at the defensive side of this team, I think that like middle triangle there with Corviknight, Florges, and I actually think that we've talked about Ursaluna Blood Moon's offensive capabilities, but this mon is also a tank. Like it has such good defenses. It has really good HP stat, really good physical defense stat. The special defense is a little bit lacking, but if you have Florges, like, do you really need that much Spadef? And if you really want more Spadef, then you could also run Calm Mind. So each of those mons I really like because it has its own form of recovery. You have Roost on Corviknight, you have Wish and Moonlight, and I think you even have Synthesis. Like, Florges can run all of the healing moves. And then, of course, Ursaluna Blood Moon also has Moonlight of its own. So there's quite a bit of recovery between those three mons. There's a little bit of pivot potential to allow some of your other mons to get in with those three as well. Mostly, I think, with Corviknight having U-turn and I believe Baton Pass on Florges, so you can safely get into your Latios. You can safely get into your Power Herb, Meteor Beam, Iron Moth. So, like, there's quite a bit here for a defensive standpoint that I like, and it mainly revolves around those three mons that I think are fairly difficult to break. Lantern can be fairly defensive as well. It has a really good HP stat. And so if you invest in its defenses, both physical and special, then it can take hits fairly well and have that slow Volt turn or Volt switch to help the team out. So I think from a defensive standpoint, I think this team is not an easy team to break. There are some difficulties, I think, in being able to handle it. So yeah, I think it's going to be pretty exciting to see how Lady Lilac can use this team both offensively and defensively, and I think it's going to be difficult for some teams to be able to break through this defensive core. Okay, next team we're taking a look at here, and this is actually our last team, the Virginia Victinis here. And Ted, what do you think about this team overall?
So some clear things with this team. They have really strong defensive cores. Using Galar, obviously a really strong grounded poison type, so you're getting T-spikes with that. Really defensive fairy type as well. You can run like Will-O-Wisp. It does have Defog, Strange Steam, Protect, Lefties, or Black Sludge. A really common set with that. Milotic, really defensive water type. Used to be a big fan of it. Previous generations, not so much anymore, just because of the power creep. But it is a really defensive water type, and that's really appreciated on this team, I feel. Fortress, they're probably their secondaries. Has a removal with Rapid Spin. Does get Volt Turn as well, so you can choose between either U-turn or Volt Switch, depending on the matchup. Offensively, those top three Pokemon are really strong. Obviously, the Iron Boulder having Mighty Cleave is really strong. Being able to break through Protects is nice. You can set up like agility sets with booster attack. Garchomp can set up rocks as well, but you can run offensive with like Dragon Dance, Dragon Claw, EQ, and some other coverage move in the back, or you can run Protect depending on the week. And then Ogerpon Fire. No Terra kind of hurts it because the body aspect would be so good for this team, getting that attack boost, but sadly doesn't get it. But Mold Breaker is always nice, being able to get bypass those annoying abilities such as like Flash Fire and stuff like that. So yeah, offensively and defensively, they provide quite a few different options for both sides.
I'm sure, and I think offensively, like you look at those top three, and like, do you really have a physically defensive mon that can take on all of those three? Probably not. You just can't. Like, are you gonna try to bring your ground type so that you can deal with Iron Boulder, and then they bring in Ogerpon that hits you with some grass moves, and like I don't know, then you try to bring a dragon type to try to beat Ogerpon, and like, I mean, Ogerpon can hit you with Play Rough, but then you also have Garchomp that hits you with Dragon Claw or Outrage, and so like, I don't know how you beat those top three defensively. Like, how are you going to be able to wall those mons? This team is always going to be able to break through just with their top three. And they're just going to have great sweep potential. Garchomp got Scale Shot back, so that mon can just like boost its speed and go absolutely insane. You can Trailblaze with Ogerpon. You have booster speed on Iron Boulder. So all of those three mons have sweep potential. They all have break potential, and it's really difficult to be able to handle those things. And then you okay, so you bring like a couple physically defensive mons, and how are you going to handle Thunderous Therian now? So like you look at some of the special attack options on this team, and it's basically just Thunderous Therian. Like, don't get me wrong, it's kind of that one mon. But that one mon commands a lot of respect. I think it's 145 special attack stat, which is just the highest offensive stat on this team, higher than even those 3 physical mons, and I think the breaking potential from this team is pretty insane. So yeah, I think the power of this team from an offensive standpoint is very difficult to handle, and I'll let Incog here talk about the defensive side of this team.
Listen, defensively, this team looks astonishing. I like it, Mike. I really do. You're gonna surely, and I guess is a bad joke, wreck it. Besides that bad joke aside, Wheezing Milo, Fortress, great defensive pieces. I think they all work in tandem with each other. Volt Switch and Flip Turn from Fortress and Milo, respectively. Wheezing's really good, just in general, to stop certain abilities from popping off too hard. It also can stop Regenerator mons from really beating you or getting back HP. I think Sableye will be slept on, even though it's one of my least favorite Pokemon. It defensively can definitely do as much as it would like. Being able to help support-wise with Thunder Wave and such will be really good. But I do think Smeargle will definitely be the question mark on this team. What will it do? What can it do? How will it cook? Because obviously defensively, Smeargle could definitely do not a whole lot with its stat line, but it gets basically any move it wants. So we'll see how well it can do. I've definitely seen Burning Bulwark sets and other moves being used on it. So we'll see how well this Pokemon can get down against physical attackers, as well as even maybe managing some funnier strategies going forward. I think that you can see a bulkier Garchomp come to some games just because maybe you want Iron Boulder or Thunderous Therian or even Ogerpon to go off. So defensive Garchomp will definitely be good with Rough Skin plus Rocky Helmet. Overall, I think defensively this seems okay. The only real non-defensive Pokemon, I guess, is technically Iron Boulder and then like Passimian, I guess. But even then, I guess I wouldn't call Passimian like defensive, quote unquote. I would just call it like a, hey, look, I have a Defiant and I can wreck you if you go into an Intimidator, which is really good. But also, like, in general, a bulk up Passimian could definitely be very scary. And even like, I mean, Ogerpon, I think it gets Leech Seed. I believe it does. It could do a Leech Seed, Spiky Shield kind of thing going on there and just be overall really disgusting. But I think you're going to find a lot of defensive solace in the Wheezing Milo Fortress core, as well as Garchomp being cool. So there is that. So I think defensively it's pretty good.
For sure. Okay, and we take a look at all of the teams so far. And our next slide here that we'll transition to is going to be the top 3 teams that each of us have chosen. So you'll see my top 3, you'll see Incog's top 3, and you'll see Ted's top 3. I believe they sent it to me in order. Mine are in no particular order. I just did who I thought had the best 3 teams here. But yeah, okay, let's take a look, see what you guys think. Top 3 teams.
All right, so
here.
I'm gonna go first here. I had to put DJS first. I disrespected you last time. I was unfamiliar with your game. The Ohio Arceus, I'm just gonna say you were almost not here, but I really looked at your team again and said, yeah, that's pretty good. And listen, Rum, you have the potential to do so much, but there's a team at 4. I forgot it, but there's a team at 4 that definitely should be ahead of you. I'm not going to say who, but I'm just saying, I am just saying, you have the potential to do great. Please don't fail me.
Yeah, I think what I thought was really interesting here was that both Ted and Incog had Build a Village Pidubs, and I was not very high on that team. But this kind of reminds me of another one that we did. It might have been the last singles PR. And we looked at, it was Bread Pudding's team, and it was another Sun team that was like absolutely insane. Like it had so much damage pressure, but it was even like missing a Mon at the time, and like it was rated highly by our PR team. And don't get me wrong, like Bread did very well with it, but I think to a certain extent, Sun has like a special place in our PR hearts. Like there's so much power that Sun has in this generation. There's so many good photosynthesis mons that and don't be wrong, like Rum put together a crazy team. Like there's a lot of pressure for that team. So
what team would really be? It's Flanders. Flanders should be ahead of Rum, but I just sat there and I was like, you have the potential, and like Vito's fourth, so then it's like or fifth rather. So I'm like, there's so many good teams, and then like it kind of, and I hate saying it, it drops off a little bit after that. But why did you rate you rated Kurt really high? I want to ask you about that. What about Kurt's team?
So I really liked their first 4 mons, the Darkrai, Great Tusk, Azu, and Heatran. I loved how much flexibility, as well as like offensive power, those 4 mons have. They have really good hazards on those 4 mons. They have good speed. There's good priority. Like I really liked those 4 in particular. Now the rest of the team is kind of like, I would say, kind of middle of the pack kind of team. I definitely miss that they didn't have a dragon though. I think I might put them like at 4th behind DJS right now, because I remember DJS's team. I remember looking at that team and going like, how do you deal with Kyurem and Iron Valiant? You know, like that team's also insane. But I think in general the team has a lot of bulk available to it, and it's just very bulky offense. And I just have like, there's a soft spot in my heart for bulky offense, and so I just really liked it from that standpoint.
Ted, you have DJS at 2nd instead of 1st. What's going on there, buddy?
So it was a tie for me for both Ronin and DGS, because I respect them both as players in the singles metagame. So it was kind of hard to switch them both up. Like at first I had DGS up front, but like I looked at Ronin's team and I was like, they're both neck and neck. So I gave the edge to Ronin because I like his team a little bit more. But don't get me wrong, I think DGS's team is really strong, and you could honestly see them both in playoffs, and they can definitely be high seeds. So like I said, like both teams are just neck and neck. They're right there.
Okay. Interesting. You know what I have found very surprising here is, how did Wreck-It Mike's team not make it into either one of your top 3?
It's potential, right? So it's like, I like Mike, I like his team, and I like him as a player, but it's potential, right? So I think that Mike's team is really good. I really do. But there's a lot of teams that are really good this time around, man. I think that that's true. I don't like to rank people as players. I like to rank them based on the teams that they draft, because if we're going off of players, I feel like Mike would have been in my top 3 in my opinion. But the thing about it is, his team is really good. But then, do I have it over something like the Ohio Arceus? Maybe, maybe not. I think that I have that team pretty good. Do I have it over something like Rum's team? Depends on the day, but also, Rum has a really good way of playing against that team, maybe. Do I have it over something like Ronin's team when I just said it's like 4 or 3? Yeah, I don't. There are so many good teams this time around that like they're fighting for that top 3, even top 5 spot. So I feel like Mike's definitely in that ballpark.
For sure. Yeah, I think one of the things I don't think I originally had, or like I think I almost put someone else instead of Wreck-It Mike, and I don't remember who it was, but I think this Smeargle actually kind of got me, and I was like, wait a second, this team has every hazard and removal on it with Smeargle, and I think that like Smeargle kind of hyped me up a little bit more for the team, which is kind of crazy to say, right? It's like their lowest point Pokemon. It's not a particularly exciting one, but I just liked the support it could offer to the team, more so than like the support that most other low tier mons could add to teams, and I thought that was kind of an interesting side of it that I liked, at least. So okay, so I guess let's go and wrap things up here, unless you guys have anything else you want to add to these teams. But this is gonna be a fun season. I'm definitely looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I'm excited to see every team perform. And yeah, I don't have anything else to add.
Anything you want to add in, Cog?
I hope all teams do well, but specifically DJS, if you run it back and you do really well, just remember that I ranked you number 1. All right. I I felt like I just last time I didn't rank him very high at all, and then he went ahead and won, and I was like, hey man,
Right?
I got nothing else.
So actually, small fun fact for anyone who's still watching here. DJS is back-to-back singles champions in the last 2 seasons. So basically, everybody in the server needs to make a collective effort to stop this man from going 3 in a row. Whatever you need to do, however you need to make that happen, you got to stop him from having the 3-peat. That's all I'm saying. All right, and let's go ahead and call it here. Again, thank you for watching our power rankings video. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. Like, do we have it right? Do we have it wrong? Who do you have as the top team? All that kind of stuff.
Don't have it right. Don't tell me that.
Of course we have it right. Of course we have it right. We always have it right, right?
Maybe you do.
We're always right.
All right. If you want to see some more of our content here from Power Rankings videos, definitely stick around, like, subscribe, and all that stuff. And if you would like to see some of our coaches, definitely hop over to our server. You'll see that in the description. And tons of coaches in this league record and upload. So keep an eye out from videos in our server. So anyway, thank you again for coming along, and we'll catch you on the next video. Bye.
Peace.
Yep.